Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of the Daily Grind. My name is Michael Price, and I'm going to be your host. And I'm really excited about today's episode because we're finally going to get into the content itself rather than discussing how we're going to have a discussion about it in the first place. And today's lesson plan has everything to do with reality itself and existence itself. And when we talk about philosophy, a lot of times the first thing we learn is about identity, what we're going to call something. We also learn about non-contradiction, excluded middle. All of these things are really important. But after studying the matter out, it is my understanding currently that there's something that precedes all of these, which is absolutely required to learn first. But before we do that, I just wanted to bring up that this podcast is correlated with a book series called The Burden of Proof, which you can look up at burdenofproof.co. If you go to, it'll take you to the shop page on the website where you can download the first book for free right now. It's called Burden of Proof, The Flaw. You'll just hit the add to cart. It'll have a couple more clicks for you, but it won't require any actual information, and it's absolutely free to download. So if you get the chance to do that, that'd be awesome. I hope that it's beneficial for you. If you learn more in a fictional narrative style environment, I think that would be an excellent place for you to start this type of material. However, it's not going to give you the fullness thereof. Sometimes it just exposes the flaw without really telling you exactly what it means to start to what it means to start to fill in those cracks. But it is a great resource. It is an enjoyable resource, especially if you're starting out trying to learn these things from a younger age. Sometimes attention spans aren't as good, and just listening to what could feel like dry material from time to time. I don't think it's dry. Maybe, hopefully, other people won't either. But for some, having it in a narrative format brings an excitement that it wouldn't have otherwise. And as I was saying, when you're young, maybe your attention span isn't quite as focused on just the learning aspect, and maybe you need more of the storytelling. So I hope, as I said, I hope that's beneficial. The second book is also available there currently. Um, I don't know when the third is going to be released. Initially, the third book was planned to already be released. This was before I had anticipated how much material I was actually going to be covering and how long it was going to take to go piece by piece, making sure that I didn't miss any steps along the way. And so, formally, as I said, we discussed the laws of engagement. Now we're going to discuss the law of reality. Now, let me see if I can get this slide pulled up. This is the first time of me attempting to do this on the show, so it may take me a moment. Please bear with me. Let's see here. And if you are on YouTube, I don't think you're going to be able to, or if you're on Facebook, you're not going to be able to see the slide here, so I apologize to those of you who are on Facebook. But for those on YouTube, and to get to the YouTube, by the way, you can just type in burdenofproof.live. It'll take you to the playlist where all of these videos are stored for the podcast, for the Daily Grind itself. Then you can click over and subscribe, or click on the live, and you should be able to see the slides we're looking at right now. Or you can look there later if you want. You know, it kind of might be helpful if I could see what I was looking at. All right. says the law of reality is all that all that is real is bound by the laws of logic. And I've got some definitions under here because it can really quickly devolve into misunderstanding if we're not clear about what each thing means. A law is a constraint or a boundary. It's something that you cannot extend beyond. Now, what I would say is we hear the word law, and a lot of times, at least for me, it's been a thing that has a negative connotation in a lot of senses. Don't get me wrong, we think they're good laws sometimes. They're ones that we do like because they prevent other people from doing undue harm and the like, but most of the time we hear the word law and we're like, but I only want to drive a little bit faster. Why would this speed limit stop me from doing so? And it just feels like a preventative measure that's not actually benefiting us a lot of the time. So I don't know if it had that for you, but for me, the word law comes with a negative connotation, a constraint. It's like you're stuck in this cage and you can't move any further, or that's just what it feels like. It feels like you're tied up and you can't get loose. And maybe other people don't feel that way. And if you didn't, then this lesson's going to be a little bit easier for you to understand why these laws of logic are so necessary in the first place, because you're not going to see them as something preventing you. Okay? Especially this one in particular. So, what I was thinking about this morning is maybe there's a different word that we use on a regular basis that may actually be more fitting. And that is where it says a law is a constraint or boundary, to maybe change it to being like a tether. When we hear the word tether, we think of something that's grounded, something that holds. And I mean, let's just think about a volleyball tether in our mind for a moment. When you go and play a game, it's probably been a while since you've played, uh, if you're anything like me, since you've played volleyball tethered. But basically, when somebody hits the ball, it goes around and around the pole really fast. But what is the tether actually preventing? I would suggest the tether is actually preventing it from spinning off where it doesn't need to be. Whether that be hitting someone else, going under a car, I mean, whatever the case is, the tether is what is preventing it. It's keeping it grounded, as you said, and keep preventing it from getting beyond where it belongs, beyond where it's possible for it to be what it is. And to me, I think that's a much, much more suitable definition of the law of reality. I may come back and actually change this later to say a tether at some point, but see, a tether comes with qualifications as well. The reason I would have to define tether, even if I put tether here, is because we think of, like I said, something like a rope, and we don't perceive how it relates or correlates to reality itself. And that brings us right into the next definition. The next definition is reality. Now, I have defined reality in this picture as all that exists. Now, the reason that we have to be really particular, especially with a word like reality, is because we use it in so many different ways. And so that puts us at a problem with quite a few of the laws of engagement I've already discussed in past episodes. For one, it means we don't have a fixed definition. It changes back and forth. For another, we don't have a distinct term to be able to describe the concepts that we're talking about because we're constantly switching the meaning. And that's just not going to be productive. And so on this first slide, I did mention that in the future I am going to try to be lenient about allowing people to take the terms that they're already used to that have a meaning in their own mind and trying to allow basically to affirm their definition, affirm your definition. If you have one and we end up discussing something to the best of my ability and come up with another word to describe a different concept that I'm trying to discuss at that particular moment. But in this case, on these very first few slides, I'm not going to shift the definitions. It's going to offer too much confusion to all the other people who are watching. If I'm having a conversation in private, maybe I can do that with you, but we need to lock down certain terms absolutely, because once again, the goal is truth seeking. If we don't have these major terms locked down, we're going to run into difficulty really, really fast. Because it's going to be somebody's going to tune in on from a different episode. Well, isn't reality this? Didn't you say reality is that? And I'm going to have to be like, well, I affirmed it under those circumstances on that day because that conversation, and it just turns into a lot of complexity. So, for the sake of clarity, reality is all that exists. Period. And there is no modifiers to it. All right. Another thing I would say we've been let down by the English language to a certain extent, because we think that when we add an adjective to it, we're just describing the thing that we were already describing. But by things that we're going to discuss in the future, likely speaking on Sunday, I'll be able to explain more why that's not the case. And we did a description of it when it comes to the bottle the other day, or like the water bottle, how it has these different parts, right? So, but when you separate them, they're no longer parts, they're two new distinct wholes, and they need their own term for the sake of the conversation, at least, if not their own term in general. Well, that same thing is going to apply when it comes to reality, because what we do when it comes to reality, sometimes we'll say my reality, or your reality, or subjective reality, or conceptual reality, or local reality. And now you can see why this is a term that I don't want to switch at all, because it is such an overused term. But let me show you why. By the law of parts, say we have reality, and we're going to use the example of conceptual reality here, saying that that is that which exists only in the mind. It doesn't exist in the real world yet. So when we say conceptual reality, what we're saying is there is a mental event such that there is brain waves. It takes actual time and reality to think about them. There is a mental event that is happening. That is real. That does exist. What does not exist is what is contained there in that mental event. So if that be a dream, or if that be a memory, because that memory is not actually confined by the laws of logic, meaning things inside of it don't have to follow the rules that reality has to follow. They're not tethered to existence itself. And so, under that definition, since reality is all that exists, and existence is that which is confined by the laws of logic, conceptual reality is not reality at all. It's something entirely different. So, I wanted to point that one out, and let's just talk about local reality. Local reality is what you see and experience in your close vicinity. So you might say, this is my reality, but you're in your reality talking about, well, what I experience outwardly nearby is different than what you're experiencing outwardly nearby. So that's a different reality. Once again, now we've taken reality and we've pulled it into parts, just like what I talked about, the water bottle, right? The water bottle with the lid and the water bottle itself, and we've taken them apart. And now what you have is two distinct wholes. Well, when it comes to reality, and you have local reality for one person and local reality for another person, and you still have this entire other portion of reality that is everything else but those two things. And now you've got three different forms of reality, and you don't know which one you're talking about in the context of the conversation the next time somebody says the word reality. And those two, in fact, cannot be reality. My reality, your reality, and local reality, by definition, are not the same thing as all that exists. So, once again, you have, by adding an adjective to try to describe a form of a reality, you have now described something that does not exist by that definition, by the definition of reality itself. You have described something that does exist when it comes to a local reality. It exists as how you are perceiving things, like I said, as a thought, as a mental event, but it does not exist as reality. Okay? Now, if we're talking about your thoughts about how you're perceiving it, then those thoughts, what they contain, and I know this is difficult, the thought itself is a mental event. It is real. But what those thoughts about reality are within that mental event, they don't actually exist in reality because they're not confined by the laws of logic. On the other hand, the things that are actually happening nearby you, say mother drops a bottle out of a stroller, that exists, that is reality. So how you think about it doesn't affect it, doesn't change the fact that that part is reality. It's just not this reality. You're simply just saying that's a real thing, that it did happen. But in the terms of conversation, we will not use the word reality for that because that's going to create confusion, because reality is all that exists. What is real could be something different. We could define real as meaning that which actually exists. But in this case, I would just say that exists. It's confined by the laws of logic. It exists. When that bottle hits the ground from out of the stroller, that event, it exists. And that way we don't overlap our terms here. Now, last part I got here, it says, nothing that exists is outside the bounds of logic. And I mean, there's some simple reasons for this. I know that probably sounds more difficult than it really is. Let's just throw this example. A thing can't not exist and exist at the same time. In the same sense, it's not possible. And we'll get more into that concept as we move forward. But that's just to show that reality itself requires logic in order to exist, in order to be tethered, as we talked about earlier, in order for it to just not spin off into nothingness and be nothingness to begin with, because it has nothing to be grounded to. And the last part of the slide says, simply put, if it is real, it is bound by logic. And that may be something that you've heard for the first time this morning. And if so, I want you to really sit and ponder it. Consider as to whether or not there is anything that you can think of that actually exists and has a direct, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Let me just backtrack to simply say, I just want you to ponder it. And what we're really pondering is this clear definition of existence we're using. If you go and change these definitions of these words from what I've listed here in this picture, you quite possibly may end up with a very different result. So, give me just a moment while I try to rebuild the video window over here on my software. Once again, this is kind of new for me. All right, I think we got it here. Hopefully that slide was helpful, those of you who were able to watch it. I will try to put those slides on the website along with slides for the rules of engagement. My plan is to do so by Monday, but I will definitely have all of those laws of engagement up by the time we do our first live show in a public venue. I'm thinking it'll probably end up being a week from Monday. I have not nailed down a location yet, but as soon as I know more about that, I will update you with the information. Hopefully, I'll know more about that early on next week. And so once again, and I want you to try to think about it both ways, that a law is a constraint or a boundary, but it's also a tether. It's something that keeps you from spiraling off into nothingness, into confusion, into chaos, and in this case, into that which cannot exist. That reality is all that exists. And existence, let's see if I can pull up my exact definition. I don't want to misrepresent. Existence is that which is confined by the laws of logic. And so I want to thank y'all for joining me for episode 14 of the Daily Grind, the Law of Reality. I'm really looking forward to what I believe we're going to be going into is going to be the law of identity on Sunday. If something else comes up, it may slightly adapt, but that is my intention for Sunday. And then on Sunday, I'll try to let you know where we're headed with most of the rest of the week. But once again, thank y'all for joining, and hopefully I will see you on Sunday's episode 15 of the Daily Grind.